The intensity of the Russian invasion of the Ukraine continues to build. The Ukrainians, of course, are fighting back, and they're fighting back heroically. But let's remember that they are a small country, smaller than Texas, and they are being attacked by a very large country, one that stretches across multiple, I believe 10 time zones. Now, Russia is not a superpower anymore in the economic sense. I guess it's arguable whether it's a superpower in the technological sense. But it does have an arsenal of nuclear weapons, and it does have, of course, a far superior military, both numerically, quantitatively, but also qualitatively compared to the Ukraine. And so what are we seeing? We're seeing Russian artillery shells slamming into Ukrainian targets, but also civilian targets, apartment buildings. We're seeing helicopters pirouetting in flames. We're seeing refugees. We're seeing the debris of war. And I think it's undeniable that behind this stands an implacable Putin, but Putin backed here by the Russian people. This, I think, is an important fact, that Putin's support in Russia apparently has increased since the war. Now, sometimes wars have a sort of effect in doing that. People rally behind the country. Putin, of course, has been fanning the flames of Russian kind of nationalism and perhaps even xenophobia. And the propaganda in Russia is at full pitch. But what's Putin trying to accomplish here? It looks like he won't be stopped. But is his goal to reduce Ukraine to rubble? What's the point of owning a bunch of rubble? Is it to occupy completely and take over the Ukraine and run Ukraine and integrate Ukraine and Russia? Ukraine becomes, in a sense, another Russian state or another province within Russia. Is it to defeat the anti-Russian government in Ukraine, to permanently detach Ukraine from the West, and to make Ukraine a kind of pro-Russian, albeit independent state? So these are all possibilities. And it seems to me that what Putin is trying to do here is either to neutralize Ukraine completely and perhaps permanently, or two, to essentially pull it right into Russia. I mean, that would be similar, for example, to what China might want to do to Taiwan, not merely to guarantee a kind of pro-communist Taiwan, but to make Taiwan, as China has now made Hong Kong, part of China. It's just an extension of China. Now, what can the West hope to accomplish here? I take a lot of the big, let's call it trash talk from people like Adam Kinzinger as pure bluster. Let's establish a no-fly zone over the Ukraine. This, I think, as a practical matter, would be impossible to do, or if possible, so provocative that it would endanger it would push us toward a nuclear confrontation, perhaps toward World War III, and in a region where we don't have vital strategic interests. In other words, the Ukraine is less important to us than many other countries in which we have had conflicts in over the last several decades. So the no-fly zone, I think, is not going to fly. So what then is the West's strategy here? Is it essentially to capitulate? Yeah, Putin, go do it. It's yours. I think that's a little dangerous, in part because Putin's then going to say, well, wow, I got the Crimea, I got the Ukraine. Well, how about the Baltics next? Not to mention the emboldening effect that will have on China. Hey, wow, Putin got the Ukraine, the West did nothing. Well, what are they going to do if we take Taiwan? And we, of course, China, are militarily more powerful, we're economically more powerful. The West would have to commit tremendous resources to repel a Chinese attack on Taiwan. So I think the end game here is that, and there's some talk about this. There was a guy, retired Army Colonel Douglas McGregor. He was talking on Fox News. And I think he spelled out what probably is the strategy of the few smart people who are strategizing on our side inside the Pentagon. And that is to turn the Ukraine, in a sense, into Afghanistan. And what I mean by that is Afghanistan became, over time, a sort of graveyard of empire. It became increasingly costly for the U.S. to maintain this kind of hold on the country. It whittled down America's morale and will, but it did so at the cost of sort of destroying the country. I mean, in Afghanistan, of course, there's not a whole lot to destroy because there wasn't a whole lot there in the first place. But I think that the West strategy now, and it's a little bit of a cynical strategy, is in a sense to turn Ukraine into a kind of Beirut. And what I mean by that is Beirut used to be a very prosperous, beautiful, tall skyscrapers, a country people would go to visit, tourism, and so on. And then Beirut was turned into complete rubble, essentially a scene for guerrilla warfare, a scene for insurgencies. And it looks like the West strategy, although it's rarely being said explicitly, is sort of, we can't stop the Russians from taking Ukraine. We can't stop the Russians from destroying Ukraine, but the Ukrainians have a strong will. They're going to fight back. And if they fight back over the long term, guerrilla style, yes, their country will be in ruins, but maybe we can make it over time very costly for Russia to maintain this kind of hold or occupation. And Putin will have the same kind of grief over the Ukraine that the United States has had, first over Iraq and then over Afghanistan.